Hello, I'm with the Kingston Field Naturalists, and I would like to share with you some of our club activities. My intention is to celebrate spring by sharing with you some of our members' pictures of spring wildlife. My name is Shirley French. I hold the education chair, and this presentation will be in two parts, so please stay tuned. The loons have already returned to our waterways. Both the males and the females migrate separately, but I have seen loon pairs back on our lakes. Also, earlier in the spring, earlier than the terrestrial spring arrival, the waterways get flooded with waterfowl moving in as the ice recedes. That's because ducks such as the greater scaup, we have the female here and the male greater scaup in our logo. These types of birds have food available as soon as the ice melts. Foods such as mollusks, insects, crustacea, plants. So spring can start a lot earlier on the waterways. But certainly signs of spring have been emerging for a month now. Plants such as hepatica have been the first food source for a number of insects. Eastern bluebirds have migrated back to the area. If you've ever driven up Highway 9, there are some nesting boxes on fence posts. This is really a good habitat for birds such as eastern bluebirds because you have a grassland, you have a forest margin nearby, and they can hunt for beetles and caterpillars from their nesting area. The snakes, such as the garter snakes, are often out in early spring, warming up, and also the female garter snakes, at this time of year, they produce a pheromone, which is a chemical attractant that brings in other males, and they can breed. Here we have a group of 4 snakes. Plants such as the mosses and ferns like a lot of moisture, so springtime where you have quite a bit of rain, it's really the ideal season for them to flourish and reproduce. KFN member Leslie Rudy has recently taken on a thesis project at Queen's, and she's studying map turtles in the Kingston Inner Harbor. She found that this year in 2020, the earliest hatchlings emerged on March 10th, which interestingly was 3 to 4 weeks earlier than in 2019. So I think this is a really strong indication of how early our spring has been this year. As you can see, the young are extremely tiny. Zoomed in, they're of course really cute, and these are a species of special concern, and we want to get more information about them to ensure that proper measures can be taken to conserve and protect this species. The shape of the shells are very distinctive in turtles. The map turtles have a pointed carapace, and even in the adults, the pointy shape is maintained compared to, say, a painted turtle, which would have a more rounded shell, and it would be shinier as well. So who doesn't like to hear the frogs calling in the spring? That's a fantastic sound of spring, as well as birds singing. So a number of frogs, the spring callers, have been out. The wood frogs have already finished their period of calling. They sound like more like quacking ducks. The boreal chorus frogs have been calling and still were calling last weekend. They tend to occupy and breed in ponds that don't have fish. Similarly, the spring peepers have been calling, and I think you would recognize their call. They have a high-pitched peep, peep, peep sound that actually can be quite deafening when you have hundreds of spring peepers. So let me play for you the chorus frog call. So the chorus frogs down here on the right, this is a chorus frog in mid-call. As you can see, they have their pouch fully distended. So different species of frogs have a calling pouch in different locations on their body, depending on the species. The northern leopard frogs have also been calling, but they tend to breed and lay eggs in marshes that have fish, such as in this picture, we have a lake with a marshy margin. The KFN has a property called the Helen Quilliam Sanctuary, which is not very far from Frontenac Park. And KFN member Janet Elliott was out looking for salamanders this spring, and this is what she found in mid-April. The blue-spotted salamanders were on the move, going to a local pond where they will breed and lay eggs. The eastern newts were out as well. This happens to be an early stage of the red eft phase. They get redder as they get more mature in the red eft stage. This is actually equivalent to the teenager phase, and in the next following summer, the adults will probably be ready to breed and lay eggs in the local pond. The third species here is a red-backed salamander, and they're really interesting in that they are completely terrestrial. The females lay eggs in clusters of 6 to 9, and they still do have a gilled larval stage, but that's within the egg, and those gills get totally reabsorbed into the larvae. By the time they emerge without gills. Let me show you a picture. So that's a picture of the larval stage. As you can see, they have a yolk sac and a vestigial gill. So if the female's in good condition, she would provide a good yolk sac for the young, and they're more likely to survive that early stage when they're learning how to hunt and locate food. So a number of butterflies have been seen in the spring, but really there's only a handful of species that overwinter as adults. And some of them are here: the eastern comma, the morning cloak, tortoiseshell species such as the Milberts on the left and the Compton. So other species and family groups characteristically overwinter as eggs, larvae, or pupa. And as I say, there's just really a few that overwinter as adults. So you may have seen the mourning cloaks out flying around when there still was a bit of snow on the ground and no flowers. If they, one assumes that they would feed on nectar, but in actual fact, they feed on tree sap. The mourning cloaks will also have a second generation, so there will be another group of this butterfly adult in later summer. But they are one of the long-lived butterflies. They can live approximately a year. So fungi also have seasonality, at least in some of the species, such as the scarlet cups, the devil's urn. These are two species that have produced fruiting bodies in the early spring, unlike the bracket fungi, which will spend years on a decomposing tree. There are many birds that move through the Kingston area in the spring. If you can get out and with your binoculars and look into the trees, especially if they don't have leaves on them yet, this is the ideal time for birding. Usually the KFN has May bird walks, but of course they have to be put on hold this year. But that doesn't mean that you can't get out and enjoy some of the birds moving through. For example, in your own backyard, you probably have song sparrows. Song sparrows have this distinctive patch on their breast and a lovely song. They stick around Kingston until early December. That's when they tend to migrate out. They can even be in a lot of the Christmas bird counts because they stick around so long into the season. Let me play for you their call from the Macaulay Cornell University Library. It's not my own recording. The golden crown kinglets would have reached peak numbers in early April as they were passing through the Kingston region. And very few actually stay and nest in this area. Most of them nest north of Kingston and into the boreal forest. Similarly, the ruby-crowned kinglets would have passed through Kingston. They mainly nest and reproduce in the boreal forest, which is north of Sudbury, so quite far north. On the KFN property on Amherst Island, we have a number of structures that members volunteer their time to upkeep. We have apartment-style nesting boxes for the purple martins, an insectivorous bird. We also have a number of individual nesting boxes for primarily tree swallows. Here we have a nice picture of a tree swallow. They are also insectivores. And unfortunately, on the eastern side of North America, insectivorous birds have been on the decline over the last 30 years. Fortunately, the tree swallows and purple martins keep returning to these nesting boxes. except on years where we have high precipitation in the spring. This can jeopardize the survival of nestlings, such as in the case of the tree swallows. The studies have shown that a high amount of rain keeps them from being able to hunt to get enough food to feed their nestlings on wet, rainy spring seasons. BioBlitz are a big community event that we have been doing for a number of years now in different regions on different years. They happen in mid-June, and they're a great way to get together and learn about biodiversity in a given area. In 2017, that was the 150th anniversary of Canada's national parks, and we had our BioBlitz at the Thousand Islands National Park in Landon Bay. Here, Diane Lawrence, who has been educating young people for decades as a volunteer with the KFN, she's instructing them on pond dipping, which is always a lot of fun. Someone has an Io moth here on their hand, a lovely moth species, but the caterpillar stage is, you wouldn't want to put it on your hand because they can inflict a painful sting with their spiny little projections. In Landon Bay, they also have an osprey platform that is being used, or at least it was in 2017, by 2 adult osprey, and they had 2 young that year. Our 20th BioBlitz celebration was at Helen Quilliam Sanctuary in 2018. That year we had fantastic weather. As you can see, Venus is above the waxing crescent moon here. As is usual, we put out lights at night to attract in moths. We had a couple of expert moth people, Mark Reed and Richard Aaron, identifying the moths. We even had cake and a lot of people who are really keen and eager to communicate what they've found and share their knowledge of nature. And Anne Robertson here is the main organizer of this event. So this year we were going to have the BioBlitz at the Fourth Lake Nature Reserve. It's a new land acquisition of the Kingston Frontenac Land Conservancy. As of this week, we will decide on the executive whether or not it's a go-ahead given the COVID crisis and everyone in isolation. So please stay tuned to our website, kingstonfieldnaturalist.org, to see if that's going to happen this year. If it doesn't happen this year, it will in 2021 at the Fourth Lake Nature Reserve. Thanks for listening, and please tune in for part 2 of this presentation.